Hey guys, today I'm going to be talking about the 2011 movie adaptation of Jane Eyre. The 2011 adaptation of Jane Eyre, you're just now finally getting around to this movie? Yes. I'm probably the last person to get around to this movie. You guys, I love all things Jane Eyre. I love Jane as herself, as a character. I love Jane. She's so relatable and likable. For the love of God, I love Mr. Rochester, as problematic as that man is, but boy oh boy, do I love me a Byronic brooding hero. So, if you have no idea what Jane Eyre is even about, because maybe you haven't seen the movie either, that's okay, because I just now got around to it. If you've never seen Jane Eyre, or read Jane Eyre, I should say, Jane Eyre is based off of the very extremely popular British classic by Charlotte Bronte, and it follows a young woman named Jane Eyre who becomes a governess, and she moves over to this, wealthy, fancy estate to become a governess at this estate. And this is where she meets the brooding but dashing Mr. Rochester. And Mr. Rochester has some secrets, you guys. And of course, there's a bit of romance going on. Yeah. So this movie adaptation, like I said, came out in 2011, so it's fairly old at this point. It was directed by Cary Joji Fukunaga, I believe is how his name is pronounced. And yeah, it stars Mia Wasikowska. Is that how her name is pronounced? Seriously, I cannot for the life of me pronounce Mia Wasikowska's name. It's something like that. Mia Wasikowska is playing our titular heroine, Jane Eyre, and Michael Fassbender. You guys, Michael Fassbender is playing the brooding, dashing Mr. Rochester. My God. So, how did I feel about this movie adaptation? Let's start here. The only other adaptation of Jane Eyre that I have seen is the 2006 miniseries that starred Toby Stephens and Ruth Wilson. That is my only other experience with Jane Eyre adaptations. I know there's several older adaptations. I have never seen those at all. I'm honestly not quite sure if I have an interest in any of them. I think there's one with Timothy Dalton, though. I think there's one with Timothy Dalton that I'm vaguely kind of interested to check out, because it's like a really long miniseries, which I think will cover just about everything in the book. So yeah, that is the extent of my knowledge of Jane Eyre when it comes to adaptations. But yeah, I do love the book by Charlotte Bronte. I definitely consider it one of my top favorite classics. It's like easily up there in my top 5 favorite classics. So yeah, this movie adaptation, did I love it? Did I enjoy it? How did I feel about it? I did like it. I wouldn't say I loved it. I'm not on the spectrum of being like, oh my dear God, I love this movie. I did like it. I enjoyed it for what it was. It's definitely a gorgeous looking film. A very beautiful, gorgeous looking film, as dark and dreary as it is, but that's kind of the beauty of the film, is that dark and dreariness of it, because this is a book that is considered Gothic literature. So yeah, Gothic literature, you have like fog and gloom and kind of this grayness and sometimes rain, so I do think the look of this film captured the Gothic look that I was expecting. So yeah, it's a gorgeous looking film. I do like how it was directed. Now, some of my issues with this adaptation do come down to the writing, and there's nothing wrong with the writing. Let me kind of put it that way. There's nothing wrong with the writing. The problem is, I guess, the runtime, I should say. This movie sits at pretty much right at 2 hours. And this is a fairly long, dense book that a lot is going on in the book. And I do think, as a result of this being condensed down to 2 hours, I do think there are certain plot elements that do come across fairly rushed and kind of quick, and sometimes certain things end rather abruptly, I should say. But I think in general, since this movie is only 2 hours, I think it did a pretty good job getting in the material that it needed to cover. Like I said, this book is pretty dense and pretty long. There's a lot that's got to be gone through in a certain particular order. So I do think this adaptation managed to cover exactly what it needed to cover, so that way you're not too terribly lost or confused about anything. Because sometimes you can watch an adaptation, and especially if something is like 2 hours and it has to hit certain beats, but then you're kind of like, wait, I feel like I've missed a step or a beat somewhere. And I do think this adaptation managed to hit all the beats that it needed to without feeling confusing or overwhelming, I think, for someone who's probably never read the book. So yeah, I since I am someone who has read the book, I was definitely able to follow it just fine, and I didn't see any like problematic area like, oh, this seems confusing to a non-book reader, you know. I didn't see any situation of that. I did like how it was kind of going to the directing choices of this adaptation. I did like how this adaptation was not linear, I shall say, because in the book you start from the time Jane is a little girl, and then when she goes to like her boarding school or whatever that is, and then, you know, when she becomes a governess for Mr. Rochester, and then her time with the Rivers family. So yeah, this adaptation is not linear. It does it starts off with Jane. She's out in what do you call it? The marshlands, I suppose. She's out there, she's stumbling around, she's lost, she's thirsty, she's hungry, and this is where she runs into St. John Rivers, played by the lovely Jamie Bell, and she meets his sisters, and then we are told Jane's story through flashbacks, essentially. Once she's kind of situated at the Rivers household, we get her childhood as flashbacks, and those kind of go through, and then we eventually get her time as a governess to Mr. Rochester filled in. And yeah, the stuff with the Rivers kind of every so often is kind of interspersed in there. And I really liked that writing and directing choice to kind of split up the story in that manner. That way, Jamie Bell's character and his sisters, who are played by Holiday Granger and Tamsin Merchant, that way that group of characters, they're not just kind of thrown there randomly at the very end and kind of taking away from everything else going on. Because even in the book, as much as I love the book, I do feel like the book kind of unfortunately slows down and drags when you do get to the Rivers section of the book. So that could have easily been a problem in this movie, that you're getting all this crazy stuff and all these big reveals that go down with Mr. Rochester at Thornfield, and then you get the Rivers section. That could have easily dragged down the movie and slowed it down way too much. So I'm glad that the writing and the directing, they decided to kind of space out the Rivers stuff, and use, you know, Jane's childhood and Jane's time at Thornfield as kind of more as like, you know, implemented almost like flashbacks in a sense. So I did like that choice. It made it easier, I think, to kind of get through. And like I said, since I was talking about that this movie, everything's condensed down to 2 hours, let's kind of go back to the romance aspect of this story. Because I love Jane and Mr. Rochester. You guys, I love nothing better than Jane and Mr. Rochester. Again, it is so freaking problematic, but dear God, again, I love me a Byronic, brooding, dashing anti-hero. So, the romance aspect of this movie, I do think Mia Wasikowska and Michael Fassbender, they have really great chemistry, I think. The chemistry is definitely there. But since their relationship is just so quickly gone through, you know, it has to hurry through. It does have this case of feeling like insta-love, that they look at each other, it feels like insta-love. They immediately start just kind of giving flirty eyes at one another and having like speaking in innuendo half the time. So there is like this feeling of the two of them just really quickly falling in love, and you're not really given much of a reason why they are feeling the attraction that they're feeling, and then the next thing you know, we get a marriage proposal. Spoiler alert. But I won't go beyond that, because I don't know how many people have actually, you know, read the book or seen other adaptations, so I think the less you know, the better. So yeah, even though there is great chemistry there, it is so quickly gone through and rushed that it's almost a little silly. You know, that there they are rushing off to the altar. It's almost a little silly how quickly it happens. And just to go quickly through the cast list here, once again, Mia Wasikowska as Jane Eyre. I thought she was a really great choice as Jane. Kind of this ethereal nature to Mia Wasikowska's, you know, her look, and yeah, she definitely inhabits the character of Jane. I think, you know, Jane is really quiet and determined. She has to be independent, you know, she speaks her mind. Mr. Rochester, of all people, you know, she tells him what's on her mind half the time, and he's like, and that really impresses him. You know, that's kind of part of the chemistry of Jane and Rochester, that he is very easily impressed that she speaks out to him. You know, she's not afraid or intimidated of him, and he likes that. You know, there's something kind of thrilling about that for him, because other women kind of skirt around him, and you know, just because he has wealth and status, you know. But yeah, I really liked Mia Wasikowska as Jane. She worked for me for the most part. And yeah, Michael Fassbender, dear God, as Mr. Rochester, too sexy for words, you guys. Yeah, Mr. Rochester, again, he's brooding, he's dashing, he's quick to a temper and quick to anger, and oh Lord, oh boy, does this man have some secrets. He has some deep, dark secrets. But I do think the movie does make that attempt to allow you to understand why he's keeping the secrets that he is, you know, whether you agree with him holding back what he's been holding back, you know, whether you agree with that or not, the movie definitely does make that attempt for you to understand where he's coming from and why. And then, yeah, we have Jamie Bell as St. John Rivers. I really liked Jamie Bell in this role. Again, I like that they split it up. That way Jamie Bell's just not randomly there at the tail end of this movie. Yeah, St. John Rivers, he's a man of God, if you will. He's one of those characters, it's like, you kind of like him, but then you kind of quickly get irritated with him. You know? It's hard to describe St. John Rivers. Can I tell you all a funny story about St. John Rivers? I remember the very first time I read this book, let me tell you, I pronounced St. John Rivers as St. John Rivers. So when I read this for like a British literature class. So when I had finished the book and I went into my class for us to have this discussion about this book, and we were talking about St. John Rivers, and my teacher kept going, you know, she kept saying St. John. And I was like, who the hell is St. John? And then it finally occurred to me she was talking about St. John Rivers, who I had been, like I said, calling St. John Rivers. So what's up with that? Can someone who's British please explain to me the St. John Rivers? Because is it just an American thing that I have the urge to say St. John Rivers? Because is that totally wrong of me? So yeah, it took me forever to get the St. John Rivers kind of in my head that's how it's supposed to be properly pronounced. So yeah, let's move on from that embarrassing fact. And speaking of the Rivers family, playing St. John's two sisters, we have Holiday Granger and Tamsin Merchant playing Diana and Mary. You know, Diana and Mary, they're hardly even in this movie, and they cast Holiday Granger and Tamsin Merchant, and I freaking love the two of them. I can always sit and watch the two of them for hours, okay? So, yeah, they have very rare, very minor roles in here, but it was, you know, it's what it is. I almost feel like you can write the Rivers sisters out and it wouldn't really make much of a difference. We have the vastly underused Sally Hawkins as Mrs. Reed, you guys, who was like, what, Jane's aunt, Jane Eyre's aunt. Sally Hawkins is literally in like the first couple minutes of this movie, and then that's it. But she was good for what she was. And then Judi Dench. Judi Dench is just in everything. You know, just about any damn British period drama. Hey, let's put Judi Dench in there. There she is. And she's always great. So yeah, Judi Dench is playing Mrs. Fairfax, who is like Mr. Rochester's, what would you call her, housekeeper? So Judi Dench, I never have anything to complain about with Judi Dench. She's always wonderful. She's always marvelous. She's like England's national treasure, okay? And then we have Harry Lloyd. Harry Lloyd is in like a blink and you miss it role. He plays Richard Mason, who I can't really go into much detail about him because that's definitely more into spoiler territory about Richard Mason. But yeah, Harry Lloyd has, like I said, a blink and you miss it role in this movie. I just want to include him because I love Harry Lloyd. I just need more Harry Lloyd in my life, and yeah, he's in this movie for like 2 minutes. So, if you can't tell, I did like this movie. It was fine for what it was. I'm just really glad I finally got around to it. Like I said, it came out back in 2011, and it's one of those period drama movies that it's been on my radar since it first came out, but I never had the access to it. You know what I mean? I never had the access to the movie, and yeah, I finally have the access to it, and I can spend the money on it because I think I watched it on Amazon Prime, if I'm not mistaken. So I did. I finally had the access to it, and I was like, I need to finally watch this movie, and I am. I'm glad I finally got around to it, so I could see what all the hubbub is about. Michael Fassbender, you guys. My God, can I just go on? I could just easily make this whole damn review about Mr. Rochester. Okay. And seriously, in my opinion, my favorite adaptation of Jane Eyre is definitely the 2006 miniseries. Like I said, that has Toby Stephens and Ruth Wilson. That is my personal favorite when it comes to Jane Eyre, because that miniseries, I believe, was about 6 episodes. I believe it was 6 episodes, and I felt like it covered a lot, and it was able to take its time, telling the narrative and the story that it needed to, and yeah, fleshing out the characters in the way that it needed to. And yeah, I don't think that Jane and Rochester's relationship, I don't think it comes across like too quickly in that miniseries, and I don't think it comes across as insta love like it does in this movie. But yeah, I put up a poll on my channel. After I had watched this movie, I put up a poll and I was asking you guys, what's your favorite adaptation of Jane Eyre? And there was an overwhelming amount of support for this movie adaptation of Jane Eyre, which I was honestly surprised about. I really thought the Toby Stephens and Ruth Wilson miniseries was going to get the majority of the votes, because I have, for the most part, seen a huge preference for that miniseries over this movie. So maybe it's just the way the votes worked out. I don't know. And then, yeah, I did get a comment. Someone did comment saying that they liked, like I said, I believe it's the Timothy Dalton version that came out maybe back in the 80s or something. There was a vote for that, even though that wasn't part of my poll, but I still liked hearing that, So yeah, for me, I like that 2006 adaptation. That's definitely my preference. Whenever I think of Mr. Rochester, as good looking as Michael Fassbender is, you guys, how I've always kind of visualized Mr. Rochester, it's always Toby Stephens when I think about it. And yeah, I do think Ruth Wilson as Jane Eyre, there's something about her performance that is just so striking and so powerful and so moving. And I do feel like Mia Wasikowska, even though I did like her performance, there's something almost a tiny bit restrained about her performance. And yeah, Ruth Wilson just lets it all out. She lays it all out on several occasions. And yeah, Ruth Wilson's performance, dear God. So you guys, that's it for my thoughts and feelings on the 2011 adaptation of Jane Eyre. Again, I'm just so glad I finally got around to this movie, because I feel like I'm the last person on earth to watch it. In the comments below, have you guys seen this 2011 adaptation of Jane Eyre? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Share your thoughts with me down below. So that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you like this video, you may like these other videos. Bye, guys.